Hi everybody, I'm here in my makeup room. I've become a hand model, but who cares about that? I've got a nice carpeted floor right here, a copy of Chutes and Ladders made by Hasbro in 2013, but not Snakes and Ladders, and lots of jokes suggest, so let's get this adventure going. So this is Chutes and Ladders. It's just as memorable as you remember it being memorable. The whole shebang is here. You got 3 players, not 4 for some reason, some pieces, and who can forget the instructions? So once the game's set up, it's time to play. Like any self-respecting person who's completely alone in more ways than one, I'll be playing with myself. From here, all you gotta do is spin the spinner and go a few spots. I was lucky enough to go up a ladder, which is great because now I have time to introduce the main gimmick of the game. Each end of the Chutes and Ladders have a pair of illustrations either doing something good and benefiting someone or doing something bad and harming someone. And a few of them are kind of weird, to be honest. Like, why does comic books make you sad? Or why does carrying an unlabeled lumpy bag to an unknown location result in ice cream? Apparently breaking a cookie jar is worth 63 spaces, but breaking a window is like 20? There better be like a dead relative or two in that jar. That doesn't add up. Perhaps one of the most jarring of these is that a pet show of all things results in you being a winner and winning the game. But anyway, there's after this there's well, I guess that's it. That's all she wrote. That's all this game has going for it. This is nothing. I spent $10 US plus tax and almost chipped a nail for nothing. I thought I was planning this video for so long. I built a passion for this thing. It took like 6 months to come up with all the jokes and everything, and I really thought there was something here. Oh, but there is. Get this shit out of here. As crazy as this is gonna seem, Snakes and Ladders, also known as Chutes and Ladders, has one of the most extensive histories for anything I've ever had to talk about. Entire empires have thrived and fallen in the time, and despite the kind of flat playing board, there is so much depth to uncover here. So Snakes and Ladders originated in India somewhere around 100 to 200 AD, around the same time as some other well-known but slightly less popular games like Ludo or Parcheesi or Parcheesi. I'm not quite sure. The script just says Parcheesi. Originally, the game was known as Moksha Patam, and as you can see, the exterior looks a bit different, but this is about the same game we all know and love. It's important to note here that there may have been a Buddhist version of this game that existed around 1000 AD, but the gameplay is relatively similar to this version, or at least I hope it would. I don't know, I wasn't around when that happened. The main reason I need to note that this game had religion-based variants was that the earliest version of the game actually had major connections to Hinduism, and they can even be partly seen in most modern copies if you squint just a little. Now, I need to emphasize that I personally don't practice anything regarding Hinduism, so I need to apologize if something's off, but based off what I researched, the most important Hindu philosophies are introduced. In some versions of the game, the top parts of the board would include deities and angels, while the bottom sections would have ordinary flora and fauna. The ladders represented getting closer to salvation through being good and having acts of good. The snakes in comparison actually had more of them in contrast to ladders, and that was meant to illustrate how failing to sin is an easy and slippery slope. Rather than simply winning a dog show or something, here the goal is to attain moksha, which in Hinduism is to achieve spiritual liberation and go above samara, which is the cycle of death and rebirth, from my knowledge at least. Again, I have no ill intention of getting anything here I say today wrong. The progression of the game is meant to represent a life journey, to achieve salvation through good deeds, whereas failure to do so will lead to you going lower down on the board, which ultimately will result in rebirth and reincarnation. So, in other words, the lessons of this old game include the differences between karma and destiny, yet pushing poor decisions while also rewarding effort, which is the main aspect that modern iterations maintain if decisions actually mattered in this game. Let's talk about probability. Snakes and Ladders, especially in modern games, are purely luck-based. There is no strategy of any capacity in this game. You spin a thing and you go the spaces. There's no alternate routes, there's no alternate pieces, there's no ways that you can actually punish other people. It is purely based off of how well you spin. Games are so limited and predictable that scientists estimate that a single player, in order to win, needs roughly 39.2 spins from start to end. It's also estimated that if 2 people are playing the game, player 1 has a tiny advantage, winning 50.9% of games, whereas player 2 only wins about 49.1% of the time, assuming they have to spin the exact amount of spaces to win, and there are no other house rules. If I were to guess, most games are neck and neck, which I would assume, considering how limited this game is. But anyway, back to the history. So around 1892, Victorian England shows up and begins to weaken the ideals of this game a bit. It's more focused on the good and bad deeds of their culture. Here, all Indian virtues are instead replaced by English ones to better reflect Victorian doctrines of morality. This time around, Ladders' illustrations included work and effort that would lead to fulfillment and success. Snakes instead existed to teach disobedience and poor decisions that would ultimately lead to illness, poverty, and being a disgrace. Also, the game was balanced in this patch update to have an equal amount of ladders and snakes to represent the ideas that for each goof up or sin, there was a chance for redemption. So really in the end, it provided a different purpose, but for a different culture. There's not nearly as much of a selfless purpose behind this, but still, it's nice. There's an incentive, and that's totally fine. Anyway, a bunch of extra conflicts would show up in the next few decades, but the most important thing to note here is that India would gain independence in 1947, but at that point, Snakes and Ladders would have already become a larger name that's been spread to the rest of the world. But we aren't here to talk about India, we're talking about board games, and a beautiful one at that. Who could have guessed that this board game, specifically designed to be baby's first board game, could have had so much story to tell? It's genuinely kind of beautiful for what it is. I was stunned learning how much of a tale existed and can appreciate Snakes and Ladders for what it is. That being a story of duality that includes so much complexity despite being deceiving in its outer shell. It's wonderful. So why the shrimp fried frick is it about slides now? Oh, I'm sorry, why is it about chutes? How hard do you need to hit your head for you to go from a reptile meant to represent sin, being a bad person, and playing a major role in this thing about morals and separate cultures, to a fun slidey slide where everyone goes wee and has a jolly joyous kerfuffle? Slides are supposed to be fun. Being a douchebag and sinning is not fun. Prisons don't have playgrounds in them. People don't go on death row down a tube slide for their final meal, and the electric chair isn't a swing. This is stupid, not even accounting for what they replaced. But why? Why would you change it? This was fine. In fact, it still is fine. What caused this change? Well, one day in 1943, this guy named Milton Bradley, who was responsible for a bunch of random board games you might recognize, like the Crocodile Dentist game, sat down at his table and said to himself, lots of people don't like snakes. They give me the heebie-jeebies. I'll make them chutes. And that was that. And to be fair, the basic emotion of fear is an infamous subjectivity, one in which every organism of our known world possesses in some capacity. Yet what if, somehow, this unpleasant response we all hold in one way or another was unanimous? What if snakes were the given subject of this unanimous discomfort? Well, I would agree with that concept. I don't like snakes that much, they're noodles that shed. But again, in the board game world, these are cartoon snakes, and unless this is Jumanji, they aren't gonna bite you. No. Of the Snakes and Ladders fanbase, the snake haters are simply pee-pee-poo-poo baby bitches. But that's it! That's the reason Snakes and Ladders has to compete with Chutes and Ladders for the same market. There's no difference otherwise. And snakes give me the heebie-jeebies, Milton Bradley? Why is this the only Milton Bradley game to get a massive redesign? Don't ants give you the heebie-jeebies? What about going through people's gunk? Or mystery dates, or breaking ice, or maintaining the dental health of a crocodile? It's only Snakes and Ladders that got the cut. And you know what that means? This game with a genuinely good lesson to teach was changed because of the fact that the rest of the world unanimously agrees that the Snakes and Ladders community is full of pussies. So now, I just want to nitpick this travesty of a modern game, like the fact that there's a spinner, because it's easier to produce. Originally it was a dice, but dice are too scary too, and that's not good. Oh, and why do recent versions only have 3 players? Literally nothing changes between having 2 players to 1,000 players other than it taking longer. There are no changes in the Snakes and Ladders meta. It is the same game, but again, it's because of Hasbro being a set of silly scoundrels that now we have this unnecessary gap between people referring to it as Snakes and Ladders or people who refer to it as Chutes and Ladders. Otherwise, there's still modern iterations of Snakes versions. I guess the only major change between them being the placements of the things, but like, how much of your luck changes in this luck-based game when that happens? Fortunately, there's some other versions of this game that exist to kind of justify their existence, except the Slips and Ladders. What do you even do with that? Honestly, what's the point of this? Just put a snake there. Dora the Explorer Edition is the same goddamn game, but the slides aren't bad, or at least I'd hope so. This is the highest quality image I can find. I don't know if Benny the Blue Bull is reacting to this hot air balloon deflating, but he's either peeved or about to teach kids at home new swear words that, for the sake of my career, I won't be repeating. Sesame Street Edition is the same story. Yeah, there's only so much that you can add to this. Trains and ladders, sure. Eels and escalators, that's a SpongeBob joke, you remember that? Snakes and lattes? Oh, that's a cute joke. There's an AC/DC song, Sin City. I think this being mentioned in an AC/DC song is pretty funny, like not the Wiggles or something, just one of the biggest rock bands in the world. The phrase back to square one originated from this game because, you know, you go down the thing, back to square one. That makes sense to me. I love this genre of board games, especially since right next to Candyland, this is the luck-based game. Two people playing this game can get the same amount of satisfaction from a coin flip. If you want a new way to play this game, consider doing snakes only. Make ladder snakes too. That's all I think. That is everything I have to say about snakes and ladders. I grew up with it being Chutes and Ladders, but it's kind of interesting how much of a name disagreement exists because Hasbro made probably the most popular version. But yeah, it's a whatever board game with some wonderful meaning and ambition behind it, and it's worth sharing the story behind it more. Luckily, there's cool 7-foot-tall historians with chiseled jawlines like me to uncover these lost secrets and infect the world with knowledge that you can make a topic in small talk. And looking back at the snakes versus Chutes whatever thing, I grew up with Chutes, though now I kinda think snakes is cooler, but people seem to make big deals for little things for some weird sense of accomplishment reasons. Why does anyone want to complain about differences in preferences? Why can't we compare what we have in common and all be friends? I don't know. With that being said, snakes is better. The rest of you are wrong and stupid! Oh shit, I broke a nail.